Well, the talking heads think the only reason to reopen the economy is to get rid of mullets, and the Pelosi party yet again holds up relief to push their agenda. I'm Mike Huckabee with this week's Breakdown. Last week, the Paycheck Protection Program was depleted of its $350 billion in funding, and Congress immediately began negotiations on a bill that would replenish the fund. But showing that they're nothing if not consistent, Nancy Pelosi and the rest of her party descended from their gilded couches on the river of designer ice cream from $24,000 freezers to make more ridiculous, albeit unsurprising, demands that just so happen to back their lifelong agendas. It's almost like they're manipulating a crisis to get their way. As one of their leaders boldly said, never let a crisis go to waste. Well, during Sunday's coronavirus briefing, President Trump said that a deal was close with Democrats to stop holding up a bill to provide more funding for loans to struggling small businesses. Now, I'm sure the delay has been due to Nancy Pelosi's fears that her two $12,000 refrigerators might break down and could cause her thousands of dollars in artisanal ice cream to melt. Well, at least she has her priorities straight. Of course, the Trump campaign had a little fun at her expense. Here's their video just released.
We turn now to that $350 billion fund to help small businesses and its workers get through the shutdown.
It will be up to Congress to restock it.
But Democrats blocking that move this morning.
They asked for $250 billion in 48 hours. I said, well, I don't think so. They objected, and I congratulate the Senate Democrats.
Speaker Pelosi, what are you going to share with us from your home?
Chocolate candy.
Thousands have been forced to wait for hours at food banks all across the country.
This is chocolate, and then we have some other chocolate here. We just got it restocked with the ice cream.
You don't want to eat up everything all at one time.
I can't do it much longer. I'm trying so hard.
We're, shall we say, enjoying.
Having to admit that, we're starving, and
I like it better than anything else.
Taping this segment, there are 22 million people out of work.
This specific program is about stopping job losses today.
This is hurting people bad.
Other people in our family look for some other flavors, but
right now it's survival move. You don't know where that next something else is going to come from.
I don't know what I would have done if ice cream were not invented. I just wonder.
The Daily Wire reported yesterday the Democrats, led by Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi, have been blocking a $250 billion cash infusion into the emptied $350 billion program, resisting Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's efforts to get the emergency funding measure passed by unanimous consent. The reason for the delay? They were pushing for more collective bargaining power for unions, more climate change rules, and, of course, bailing out blue states that have been hemorrhaging tax revenue. In other words, California and New York. Funny, aren't those the states that Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer represent? Surely just a coincidence. Well, fortunately, an agreement was finally made yesterday to replenish the PPP, though in the words of Mitch McConnell, and I quote, "It's unfortunate it took our Democratic colleagues 12 days to agree to a deal that contains essentially nothing that Republicans ever opposed. In my view, it's indefensible that Main Street's small businesses and their workers had their assistance cut off for partisan leverage. The American people cannot be political leverage." End quote. That's exactly right. And it's become clear as day, in fact, that many on the left view the coronavirus pandemic as nothing more than a means to push their very partisan agenda on Americans. And by the way, in a Sunday interview with George Stephanopoulos, in which she repeatedly noted how nonpartisan her colleagues are being on the issue of help for small business, Pelosi still managed to finger point at President Trump and would not give Democrats any of the responsibility for the delay in funding. "He's a poor leader," she said of the president. "He's always trying to avoid responsibility and assign blame." Here's Nancy Pelosi on This Week with George Stephanopoulos.
Frankly, I don't pay that much attention to the president's tweets against me. As I've said, he's a poor leader. He's always trying to avoid responsibility and assign blame.
Nancy, isn't that exactly what you are doing in this interview? If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, I hope you do. Hit the notification bell like button while you're at it if you are enjoying the content. Well, I'm getting awfully tired of hearing leftists mock and attack people who are demanding easing of restrictions so that they can go back to work. Their frustration is perfectly understandable. First, some of the restrictions imposed, especially in blue states and cities, are ridiculous. They're unconstitutional, and they have no impact at all on reducing the spread of the virus. For instance, refusing to let people buy needed items such as seed to plant gardens that are available on the shelves in stores that are still open. Now, just because a governor or mayor doesn't deem those particular items as essential doesn't mean they aren't essential to somebody. What about shutting down safe drive-in services at churches while allowing drive-through liquor sales? Or canceling all elective surgeries, including cancer biopsies, all the while allowing abortion clinics to continue taking the lives of unborn children? That's not public health and safety. It's tyranny and idiocy. Besides, aren't the leftists always claiming that many Americans are just one paycheck away from disaster? Yet when Americans get desperate after losing 6 paychecks or even their jobs, the same leftists mock and belittle them. On Saturday, following nationwide protests to reopen America, millionaire actor Patton Oswalt tweeted, "Anne Frank spent 2 years hiding in an attic, and we've been home for just over a month with Netflix, food delivery, and video games, and there are people risking viral death by storming state capitol buildings and screaming, 'Open Fuddruckers!'" While I congratulate Mr. Oswalt's ability to afford his Netflix subscription, food delivery, video games, and months without a paycheck, a little news flash for the obtuse but not very funny comedian. Not everyone can do that. Of course, Don Lemon, in typical out-of-touch Don Lemon CNN fashion, had this little gem to share.
I'm so mad about a whole bunch of things. I have to keep my composure because I want to keep my job. Those people are out there complaining because they don't have haircuts? Who the hell do you think you are? And if you're so upset about it, you should be mad at the president.
That's right. Don Lemon of CNN thinks all of you who want to reopen America want to do so because you need your hair cut and styled. It couldn't possibly be because you're tired of having to rely on an inept government to keep you afloat. Most of the liberal talking heads live in deep blue cities with dense populations. No offense intended. And they're notorious for being bubble dwellers who neither know nor care about how people live outside of their own social circles. They can't comprehend, or maybe they just don't want to, just how devastating to people's lives this economic shutdown is, or how angry people get at having government arbitrarily trample their constitutional rights. So maybe this helped give them a little perspective on Americans who don't understand why they're expected to endure the same draconian quarantine measures as, say, New Yorkers. Matt Margolis at PJ Media separated out the 8 counties of just downstate New York, and he treated that geographically small but densely populated and hard-hit area as if it were a separate nation from the U.S. And he found that just those 8 counties, just the 8 counties, would lead the world in confirmed coronavirus cases at over 16,000 cases per million people. Meanwhile, without downstate New York, the U.S. would drop completely out of the top 10 entirely, from 7th place all the way to 13th. And also, despite the fake news about the U.S. leading the world in coronavirus deaths, as I already mentioned, we actually ranked 8th in deaths per million in population. If downstate New York were a separate nation, it would rank number 1 in deaths per million, and the rest of the U.S. would drop to number 11. Of course, none of this means that Americans anywhere should stop taking sensible precautions to avoid catching or spreading the disease. But it's time we recognize that someone in Arizona or Alabama who drives his pickup alone from his ranch house to work as a night watchman, just isn't as likely to contract the disease as New Yorkers who pour out of apartment buildings to cram shoulder to shoulder with strangers in a subway car on their way to work in a crowded Times Square restaurant or the New York Stock Exchange. And that's the problem with one-size-fits-all solutions. They just don't fit all people. Thanks so much for watching. Now, if you want more of my thoughts on the news of the day, sign up for my newsletter at MikeHuckabee.com. It's absolutely free. You can subscribe below, click the notification bell, and the like button if you enjoyed this video. And we hope you'll leave a comment as well and tell me what you think. Also, please tune in for the next episode of Huckabee this Saturday. Well, that's it for this edition of Breakdown. I'm Mike Huckabee.